to run through some housekeeping. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening, so if it does go off, please make an orderly exit. And the muster point is the car park by the pub across the road. Please make sure that your phones are in silent mode or turned off so that they don't disrupt the flow of the meeting. This is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, and so only those registered to speak are permitted to do so. I'll call those up at correct time and give further instructions from there. And the meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the website. I'll now just introduce the top table. From committee services, we have Kira Keller. Our solicitor this evening is Amy Shipley. Our planning manager is Alice Cosnett. And our planning officers are Louise Coleman, Declan Jeremy, and Paul Thompson. And Alice, you've got a statement prepared?
I do, thank you, Chair. My role is to provide impartial advice and to assist members in their decision taking.
Thank you very much. Okay, we can move on then to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillors Keithley and Passingham with Councillor Parker as substitute.
Thank you very much. Item 2, disclosures of interest. Councillor Hench-Serafin.
Yeah, on item 3, I shall be stepping down from the committee and speaking on application 22/02792/Vary. Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eden.
Thank you, Chair. On the same application as Councillor Hencher-Serafin, I'm the neighbouring ward member. The applicant's family frequent where my partner works, and since their integration into the community around 4 years ago, I've become friends with several members of the family. So having checked with the solicitor, I've been advised that it's best if I step away from the debate as part of that.
Great, duly noted. Thank you very much. Councillor Scorer.
Thank you, Chair. Application 5, I'm a customer, non-pecuniary interest because I do use Red Horse Fuels, so I'm a customer there, but I come with a clear and open mind.
Very good, thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
I'll echo Councillor Scorer. I'm also not terribly frequent, but have been a customer of Red Horse. I come with an open mind on the issue.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parry.
Thank you and good evening, Chair. Likewise, I purchase diesel from Red Horse Vale more often than agricultural products.
Thank you. Any further disclosures? No. In which case we can move on to item 3, which is our first application. Application 22/02792/Vary, Land off Redditch Road, Studley. Louise is our presenting officer, so when you're ready, take it away.
Thank you. Firstly, I need to highlight that the location plans on page 19 of the agenda pack are incorrect and need to be disregarded. The correct plans are shown as in this presentation. So with the first slide, which is one of the plans, the application site is identified by the black dot on the map and is located north of Studley town. The site, identified by the red line on the plan, is located within the West Midlands Greenbelt and is also in the Arden Special Landscape Area. The site is situated approximately 500 metres north of Studley built-up area boundary and lies within part of the local wildlife site, which also includes the larger agricultural field in which the site is located. A public right-of-way is located approximately 200 metres west within an adjoining field and identified by the hatched green line. A group TPO lies in land to the north, identified by the solid green line, and the pink hatch line is the county boundary with Redditch. This application seeks to amend 2 conditions attached to Planning Permission 19/01601 FUL, which permitted the creation of a residential caravan site for 2 Gypsy and Traveller pitches. The permission allows for the stationing of 2 mobile homes, 4 touring caravans, as well as utility blocks, storage sheds, sheds, dog kennels and hard standing. Planning permission was granted for this development with a temporary 3-year permission and a personal permission restricting the occupancy of the site to the applicants and their dependents. The applicants are seeking to vary condition 1 in order to make the temporary 3-year permission permanent and to remove condition 2, the personal permission attached to the development to allow unrestricted occupation. The proposal would involve the same form and quantity of development as previously approved under Planning Permission 19/01601/FUL, with the addition of a close-boarded fence dividing the 2 pitches and brick walls with pillars forming the site entrance. This first photograph shows the first pitch with the mobile home, gravel hard standing area and limited area of tarmac underneath the mobile home, looking in a northerly direction. Panning around to the southern boundary of this pitch is the utility building, shed and 2 touring caravans. This view is looking in a northeasterly direction, showing the dividing fence between the 2 pitches. This is showing the second pitch on the site with its mobile home and utility building in the southwestern corner. This is looking in a northerly direction, showing the sheds and 2 touring caravans and the northern boundary fence. This is looking in a westerly direction with the stock-proof post and rail fencing, new hedgerow and tree planted as part of the original permission. This is a view of the site access, and this is a view approaching from Redditch Road from a southerly direction, looking upwards. In the assessment of this development impact on the Greenbelt, this development's impact on the Greenbelt, it is clear that it is deemed to be inappropriate development, whereupon very special circumstances are required to be demonstrated to outweigh this harm. In the determination of the original temporary permission, it was assessed that the shortfall of gypsy and traveller sites in the district, lack of alternative sites, and the personal circumstances of the family, including the best interests of the children and medical needs of the family, cumulatively amounted to very special circumstances which were sufficient to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt. However, it was not considered that these VSCs were sufficient to grant a permanent permission and that the proposal should be reassessed at the expiry of the 3-year permission. It was originally hoped that by the end of this 3-year period, a gypsy and traveller local plan could be prepared and alternative site provision made. Unfortunately, this hasn't occurred, and at the present time, all that exists is the initial broad location work identified within the core strategy. As identified in the committee report, a significant deficit of pitches remains compared to the GTAA requirement of 70 pitches, and the council continues to be unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable sites. This represents a significant material consideration when assessing whether a permanent permission would be appropriate. Officers considered that the unmet need for gypsy and traveller sites in the district, together with a lack of any alternative sites and the loss of 2 pitches in the event of the death of the named family or in the event they move on, results in such magnitude and weight that they combine to form very special circumstances that outweigh the harm to the openness and inappropriateness of development in the Greenbelt. This is before the personal circumstances of the site occupants are accounted for, and therefore officers consider that the removal of the personal permission and the provision of a permanent permission is justified. There's one update to note in the report, in the update sheet, and the recommendation is to grant the permission with the inclusion of conditions and notes as detailed on page 17 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll move on then to our first speaker, who is Councillor Colin Summers. Good evening, Councillor. Any of those seats is fine. Yeah, that's fine. It's the button on the right-hand side to turn on the microphone. You have 3 minutes. I'm happy to give you a 30-second warning ahead of your time expiring. Otherwise, once you're ready, take it away.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us here to speak this evening. I would say, for the record, that these are not my personal views, but the views of Studley Parish Council. As you are aware, and I think has been previously stated, the site was established on Greenbelt land without permission, but the planning committee at the time saw fit to grant temporary residency with a recommendation of 13 different points. In addition to those points, it has recently been brought to our attention that the ground level has been raised by compacted hardcore, and as a result of this, surface water runoff has caused part of the adjacent field to flood. I believe even a tractor struggled at harvest time, the once. And the first 2 cottages in Green Lane, which is adjacent, are subject to some flooding, and one, I believe, flooding actually went into the house. Far be it from Studley Parish Council to tell you how to do your jobs, but may we suggest that perhaps temperate residency be extended until the 13 points are fulfilled or struck out, as the case may be, and the issue of flooding is explored a little bit more by your case officer. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say from Studley Parish Council.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions for our Parish Councillor? Yes, Councillor Parry.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. I wonder whether you can advise when this came before Studley Parish Council and they debated it and discussed it and voted on it, was the recommendation to object to it unanimous, or was it a split vote?
I can't recall exactly what the vote was because it's quite a time ago now. I would have to find that out for you. I wouldn't want to say one way or the other and run the risk of being wrong.
That's quite right, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Harvey.
Evening, Councillor Summers.
Good evening.
In the papers we have in front of us on page 3, second bullet point reads, amongst other things, site does not constitute a sustainable form of development. Could you outline the reasons why your council came to that view?
Yes, I believe at the time it was discussed about the services to the particular site. As it was Greenbelt, services just weren't there.
Could I just ask you to expand on the word services? What sort of, do you mean plumbing, electricity, or do you mean bus services or schools, or what sort of services? Yeah,
I mean things like electricity, sewage, and that sort of thing. Not bus services.
Any further questions for our Parish Council representative? No, in which case, thank you very much for your contribution this evening.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on now to our final speaker on this item, Ward Member Councillor Henry-Serafin. Good evening, Councillor. As you know, you have 5 minutes. Happy to give you a 30-second warning, and otherwise, when you're ready, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Nice to see all you in a different light. Anyway, I've always objected to this, and as a council, we are here to protect Greenbelt. And we have refused quite a few applicants on Greenbelt for building. The thing that mainly I am concerned with is that the conditions were not upheld in the beginning. And it clearly states at the bottom of the conditions that planning is void if these conditions are not upheld. I have grave concern that the amount of hardcore on this site extends to the whole of the site, and I witnessed lorries going in with hardcore and roughly estimated how deep the hardcore was. You're probably talking of about 140 tonnes of hardcore on this site. And where the soft landscaping is, it is actually on top of the hardcore, and it extends probably about a foot deep at least, which, as the parish council have said, causes flooding in the field north, which goes down to the one end of the cottage, down the driveway, and has entered the house in previous times. Once the green belt has been given away, we've lost it. Now, the only one thing I can say, you could defer this for a proper inspection whether all these conditions have properly been met. I feel like over the years I've dealt with enforcement, I've sent photographs in. Unfortunately, we can't draw these photographs out. And then the other thing would be that we could be allowed, hopefully, to give another temporary permission, maybe some sites to come up. And the other thing I feel is we look at brownfield sites first, not greenfield sites. And I can't say much more. I agree with what the parish has said, and I've said a few comments on this before, and I think you've got to think carefully about this because it's so easy to give away greenbelt land, and we shouldn't be.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Members, do we have any questions for our ward member? I have a very brief one. With regards to the flooding in the adjacent field that you've referenced, could you elaborate on just how widespread that is with regards to the area and if there's any evidence of what may have happened beforehand?
Well, when they moved onto the site, there was a hedge and trees at the back of the cottages in Green Lane. That was totally removed, and I believe there was a ditch in there which automatically drained the water going down. That was taken completely out. So the residents had to put up a new fence because it was totally open. Previous, I couldn't see through that hedge. I'd been in there before any development or occurred, and it was totally thick hedge. So you take that out, if you fill up a drainage channel, it causes flooding in the field above. It doesn't drain away.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions for our ward member? No, nothing? In which case, thank you very much for your contribution. Right, members, we can now move on then to points of clarification from our officers. Anyone have anything? Councillor Parry?
Thank you. With regard to the concerns that have been made with reference to flooding and appropriate drainage on the site, I can't see anything in the conditions that would be able to alleviate this situation. Can you advise, is there if we were minded to grant this application, what type of condition could be placed on it to have more robust mitigations? Because I notice the lead flood from WCC, their comments extend to the original application, and my concern is that they haven't come back on this, and there hasn't been. Have you as officers been able to go back to the WCC lead flood and question the concerns around the flooding? Because obviously, if there has been extensive hardcore put down, there needs to be appropriate mitigation for drainage and flooding.
Yes, the issue has been raised and has been examined in considerable detail by officers. There may have been hardcore being road planings compacted, imported into the site. They are permeable. Gravel is permeable. The only area within the site that is impermeable is the tarmac areas, which are restricted to the areas where the mobile homes are. The grass within the site is extremely healthy and well maintained. That indicates that the drainage within the site is working. It's doing its purpose. The LLFA don't comment on applications of this nature. However, because of the issues raised and by the ward member, I have had a response from the LLFA after explaining the situation. I would say that there's probably about half a foot difference between the level of the land adjoining. However, there's no level details available from when the site was unoccupied. So it's very difficult to gauge exactly how much has been increased. Also, the LLFA have come back and identified, it is in page 11 of the report, where they are aware that there is flooding issues in the area, in particular Green Lane. They had provided a plan showing areas where their floodwater accumulates, and it is within the area in this southwestern corner of the site here, or the adjoining land, I should say. Now, that is also historic. So how much weight can be attributed to a development coming forward? The LLFA's perspective is that the level of impermeable surface is very limited, and they didn't recommend any solutions to be attributed to this particular development. There is a field next door, there is a field drain next door, but it doesn't appear to be maintained. There is a fence that's been erected, which is dog-legged, and how much weight can be attributed to that diverting natural flows that have historically occurred. Again, it's evidence at the present moment in time, as explained in the paragraph, second paragraph on page 11, we don't consider that there's justification with the sufficient evidence to attach that condition.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Chairman. On page 12, middle of the page, there's reference to it's not considered that these very special circumstances were sufficient to grant a permanent permission, and the proposal should be reassessed at the expiry of the 3-year temporary permission. Has that reassessment taken place? If so, what were the criteria that were used, and what was the outcome of that review?
In terms of the reassessment, members wanted to and hoped that the local plan would be adopted, and we would have areas of alternative sites that could direct the occupiers of the site to. We haven't got any further forward than when members looked at this site back in 2020. I think that answers the question.
It gives me a different perspective on the question, because I read that to say that certain criteria would be applied to the permission that had been granted to review performance over the past 3 years, and that therefore a conclusion would be drawn. What you've said is the issue is that you've looked at is whether there has been a change in the availability of sites, and that's different. I accept that. That's fine. I did have a second question. The second question, there's a reference in the papers to permission being granted on a temporary basis, rarely being extended. I'm just wondering what position we're in this particular case. Were we to refuse the application as put forward, what would happen to these people and the site if we simply said no, we refuse this on flooding grounds or whatever grounds?
The applicants are identified in our Gypsy and Traveller caravan count. They are part of the need of the district. Removing the occupants from this site will require an alternative. Well, they would effectively be rendered homeless, and they would be counted towards the additional need within the district. So members also need to be mindful of the aspects in the report of the human rights.
Thank you. I have a question myself. It was with regards to a point raised by the ward member around conditions not being implemented from the extant permission. What bearing does that have on what we're looking at tonight, or is it purely an enforcement matter?
From officers' perspective, the applicants with obviously the development was partly retrospective, so there was timescales for submission of details with various aspects with respect to the conditions. There was one condition which was discharged relating to external lighting, and having been on site, because that was discharged because there was the agent had identified there was no external lighting. That having been on site, there is low-level lighting within the site itself. So therefore, we do need to ensure that detail is submitted. Environmental health are consulted, and we get that condition redischarged. But as far as officers are concerned, all the conditions that were attached to the original permission, aside from that one, have been met.
Thank you. Any further points of clarification? Councillor Fleming.
I remember this the first time it came in. And one of the conditions was that one of the people who was occupying the land had a specific need to be near Redditch Hospital. Is that still an ongoing situation? Okay, and just a couple of quick questions. If we were to go against this tonight and say we don't want it to become, it's not within us our gift to say we would like to extend the temporary, that would have to come back as a separate application. If we say no, we're not going to make it permanent tonight, would they then have to come back again with a separate application to extend the temporary permission?
No, you could extend the temporary permission. Okay. And sorry, in terms of the personal circumstances, it is in the report, but the hospital is Worcestershire Hospital. They couldn't register in Redditch because it's not specialist in the area concerned.
So it seems to me that a large proportion of your recommendation to grant is because SDC doesn't have anywhere else official sites to put them. Is that correct? Is that one of the main reasons that you've offered this grant, because there's nowhere else for them to go?
It is a factor which carries officers' opinion significant weight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further points of clarification? No, in which case we can move to the debate. Who would like to start? I'll start picking on people. Councillor Fleming.
I am minded to refuse the permanent application and look at giving us an extension or another temporary solution. I think I live in Stratford-on-Avon, and we've had this situation over and over and over again. And this seems to be, it's following the usual pattern. So from my perspective, rather than allow a permanent and also allow it then to be opened to others, I would prefer it to remain as a temporary licence and to remain purely for the families. That's where I see it at the moment. Having listened to all the sort of various arguments and whatever else, I think that's the safest way for us to move forward, especially as it's in the green belt.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? No one jumping? I'm happy to add my thoughts to that. I mean, I'm broadly in support of that. I think we do have to be very aware that it is in the green belt, and that's something we have a duty to protect, but that's notwithstanding the very special circumstances that do exist and have been demonstrated to be adequate to grant the extant permission. Now, with regards to the personal circumstances, I do feel that those are specific to the site, and I'd be minded to agree that those the removal of the second condition for personal permission shouldn't be granted, and that actually it should just be on the basis of these occupants. My reasons for thinking that are that the justification within the officer's report references an appeals case where the inspector determined that for lack of a better word, demise or moving on of the individuals in that case would have a detrimental impact on the land supply as a result. Because in this case we have a multi-generational family living on the site, has been demonstrated in the officer's report, I think that the risk of that is mitigated significantly. So I think from my point of view, I'd be supportive of maintaining that condition. I'm feeling slightly more flexible on the initial one around permanent, however. I think we are right to consider that because it's greenbelt, we should be minded to keep the protections therein. I have concern, though, that the position the authority is in delivering gypsy traveller sites does not look to have a swift resolution, and that another temporary permission would just kick the can down the road and potentially exacerbate any circumstances and also the situation within the local community around this site. So I'm less supportive of that one. I'm keen to hear what other members think, though. Councillor Harvey.
My start point is that this is an application that was approved. The principle of development on this site was approved in 2020. So the committee at the time took the decision in principle that development in these circumstances, in the very special circumstances that they detected them, was sufficient for them to be convinced that the principle is accepted. The principle is still accepted. The question for me is what's changed? Pragmatically, this council is in the obverse position of its 14.5-year land supply. As far as gypsies and travellers, there's a defined need for 70 pitches, which has been there for at least 5 years, and there's been absolutely no movement on that at all. Indeed, where pitches have been found, they have been on at the behest of gypsies and travellers themselves. Neighbouring Warwick in May is a prime example. The chances of us finding 70 pitches, even by 2027 for the new local plan, I think are infinitesimally small. This would at least provide 2 towards the 70 that are required. From my point of view, I would just simply, if you take into account the human rights implications of this, and drawing upon experience in my ward of a site which was granted temporary permission and then won on appeal when they sought permanent permission, I think we just bite the bullet and come to the conclusion that this is a site, it had the principles, it's been accepted, it's been operated satisfactorily. The evidence on the flooding issue isn't persuasive in the entirety. That's the only issue upon which I can see that there is some doubt. On balance, and with the prospect of an appeal based upon human rights, I'm quite happy to support the officer's recommendation, and I'll propose that is the case. I know our lawyer was waiting for me to say those key words.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually happy to second Councillor Harvey. I actually feel quite strongly that if we extend for another 3 years, I don't think that actually helps the welfare of the family concerned. And I think in view of the special circumstances regarding the family, that if it was permanent, I think it would have a great impact on their well-being to know that they had a permanent base, and that would be of significant benefit to them, which relates back to the special circumstances. So on that basis, and providing the flooding issue has been properly addressed, or at least can be monitored to make sure that there isn't significant, then I'm very happy to second it, because I think the welfare of the family with a situation like they have, I think to know that where they live is permanent. The site as it's temporary, but it's got a good permanent feel. Nothing's going to change much from its physical appearance. So that would be my view. I think it's time this family felt they knew where home was, and I think it would have a real beneficial impact for them and the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Parker.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Yeah, I kind of want to come back to this issue, and I think if as a council we were serious about allocating sites for travellers, which we obviously thought we were when we issued the 3-year temporary, we granted the temporary usage of the site for 3 years. We have absolutely failed to do anything in those 3 years. There's no, it would appear there is no immediate change of plan, and there's going to be nothing coming forward in the near future. And so I think we don't really have a strong moral position on this. You know, these are, you know, there is a known requirement that we are not fulfilling, and if we're not fulfilling it, then how does it get fulfilled? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Can I just point out to Councillor Parker that it's not quite accurate to say that nothing has been done since 2019. There was a call for sites, for Gypsies and Travellers sites, 2021 or 2, I think, but it led to no productive policy. The point I make is it wasn't that people were doing nothing about it, it's what they did was not fruitful, that's all.
Thank you. Can I just check at this point, the proposal you've made is for accepting both conditions?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to contribute to the debate at this point? Councillor Holmes.
Just a quick comment that I'm minded to agree with the Chair's previous comments on the removal of the personal circumstances around limiting it to the current family and not opening it up to wider groups. So I think I agree with the Chair on that point. So not minded to remove that condition.
Thank you. With regards to that point then, I think there's general acceptance of the direction of travel on this. Councillor Harvey, are you willing to consider a potential amendment to maintain the permanent permission aspect but not the second condition change?
Can I have clarification from the legal officer? What is the implication of... My concern is that if the personal restriction isn't lifted, that these two pitches won't ultimately become part of the supply.
Yeah, so I think it's dealt with in the officer's report that if it's retained as personal, then it doesn't count towards the pitches.
But once they've moved on, not
Yeah.
it counts.
Yeah,
as this
yeah. If it wasn't personal, once there was a new family on it, then it would count towards those pitches.
And my point of view is that it's important that we expand, take every opportunity to add to the number of pitches that can be used for jippers and travellers. So I would object to your objection, so to speak, and I would prefer that the proposal is as put forward by the officers.
Okay, thank you. With the clarification from the officers, I take that point, and I'm happy to take that. Councillor Fleming.
My only concern about removing the personal limitation is the fact that it then could become a commercial site. So the current user then brings other people on and charges them rent or whatever else, and it becomes an income as a commercial generation. That's one of my main concerns about that.
Thank you. No, I think that's noted, and I did have some sort of concerns around not quite that, but I think that, as I say, the clarification we've had from the officer is sort of firmly on more supporting Councillor Harvey's position, just on the basis that delivery of the sites in general is kind of the most important aspect of the application as we've got in front of us. Would anyone else like to contribute to the debate, or no? In which case we've got a proposal which has been seconded to grant in line with officers' recommendations. Can I see all those in favour, please?
7.
And opposed?
1.
In which case, committee resolves to grant application 22/02792/vary. Okay, we can now move on then to item 4, which is application 24/00345/FUL, The Cottage, Peacock Lane, Tyso. Declan's our presenting officer, so once you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. So the proposal is for the erection of a detached garage with home office above and the formation of a vehicular access and boundary treatment at the cottage. The property sits on the corner of Peacock Lane and Main Street, as denoted by the black dot on this map. Next, we've got you can see the application site outlined here in red. As denoted in the plan, you can see the application site is within the Tyso conservation area, shown by the purple line, and the cottage is Grade 2 listed, as you can see by it being filled in red. The other red properties are neighbouring listed buildings. Within this slide, you can see the proposed site plan. The development is located north of the property, with the new access located off of Main Street here. So this is the existing property. This is the garage as proposed. The proposed driveway and proposed access. Here is the proposed elevations. And here is the proposed wall plan. You can see this is essentially taken if you stood on Main Street. The dry stone wallings running along the boundary here with the excess, and there is some planting nearer to where this tree is. And this is what the garage will look like from the street scene. This first image is predominantly of the house itself, which is here to the right, and the garage is proposed around this location here, just to the left of this tree. This picture is a little bit closer up to where the proposed garage is to be, so it's essentially in replacement of this outbuilding as existing. And this is just slightly to the left of the last picture where it shows the driveway would be, the removal of some trees, and I believe the access is just to the left of the picture here. So in summary, the proposed erection of detached garage with vehicular access and walling is considered to harm the special landscape and scenic beauty of the Cotswolds National Landscape and fail to preserve and enhance the Tysoe Conservation Area. The development is also considered to fail to preserve or enhance the setting of the cottage, which is Grade 2 listed, unless then substantial harm arises to its setting and that of the Tysoe Conservation Area due to the proposed scale and the siting of the building. Less than substantial harm will be created, and it is not considered to outweigh the public benefits. In addition to this, further information is required by ways of an arboricultural assessment, a tree survey, to allow the assessment of the development in relation to the impact of the development on the trees within the conservation area, and an archaeological report is required to enable the assessment of the potential impacts of the development on the land that is classified as high archaeological interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on then to our first speaker, who is Councillor John Tongue of Tysoe Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor. So you've got 3 minutes, and I'm happy to give you a 30-second warning ahead of your time expiring.
We do indeed. If you give me a nod or something, I'll be able to switch them for you.
Jolly good. So it's just the button on the right-hand side to turn on the microphone, and once you're ready, take it away.
Thank you. If we could have photograph 2, that's photograph 2. You can see the parking problems, and you can also see the extension on the listed building to the left-hand side. That's 35 years old. Could we have 3? And again, this is the different view, the opposite. Again, showing the difficult what the applicant has with parking, and it also shows this extension. 4. This is the difficulty of parking on the road around the mouth of Peacock Lane and the obscuring of the exit entrance to the doctor's surgery on the right-hand side. 5. This is the only parking space, and it has to be either backed into or backed out of on the site. It's not a proper site, it's just a bit of, and not a proper parking area, it's just a bit of land. 6. This is the front of the site, and it shows the land rises to the back, probably 3 foot at least. It also shows the shed on the right-hand side is where the garage is going, the proposed garage. 6. This is the frontage again. The garage is going down by the gate, and the exit and entrance is by the bushes on the left-hand side. The Parish Council consider that the applicant, having a young family, needs to provide on-site parking to safeguard 2 small toddlers whilst getting them into and out of their cars. There are no objections to this by anyone, County Council, District Council, Parish Council or neighbours. This must be allowed. The applicant was aware of the previous planning application in December 2011, and he assumed that as his is fairly similar, it would get treated in a similar manner to the previous approval. He's employed an architect, a local architect, and he has produced a very satisfactory scheme, as you've just seen. It's traditional in design, it's traditional in the use of local materials. And these are, as the adjoining properties. In fact, the planning officer states in his design and visual impact report, I consider the design of the building to be sensitive for the rural edge of village location and in keeping with the wider area. Sorry? 30 seconds. Left? Yes. Oh, God. This is the best position of the site because of the rising land. If you put it up, then you will, it'll be a bigger visual impact, and it will take away play area in the garden for the children, and it will stop the visual view from the church, the ANOB. The Parish Council respectfully asks this committee to approve the scheme with conditions. It certainly shouldn't be refused at this stage. If the committee considers it needs a few further tweaks before approval, perhaps the planning officer and applicant should have a site meeting to find a solution and avoid further costs and time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Members, do we have any questions for our Parish Council representative? Nothing forthcoming? No, in which case, thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, our next speaker then is Alex Cross, applicant for the application. Good evening.
The overlap, this one.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, the procedure's the same. You've got 3 minutes. I'm happy to give you a 30-second warning, and microphone's on, so when you're ready, take it away.
That'd be great, thank you. I'm Alex Cross, the applicant. A short bit of background, which I think is relative to the design of this. I was lucky enough to grow up in Balscott and Hawley in old Hornton stone buildings. Me and my partner really loved the area, the people, and we wanted to bring our children back here so they could have a similar experience to me. Because of that, it was really important to make this plan respectful to the history of Tyso, whilst at the same time keeping the kids safe from the road. With regards to the refusal, I understand that there's a tree issue, but we have now supplied a mitigation plan, so that should be okay. There was also a refusal against AS10, which I think is the Tyso development, but that's only relative to dwellings and existing buildings, so I don't know if it's relative. So I'm just going to talk to the core strategies that are related to preservation and enhancement, which I believe we've met with the design, but I guess it's subjective. So for some site context, I've supplied a few photos, but this key one shows that pre-1900 there were 2 dwellings on that land, so it wasn't always just green land. And I've combined the photo so you can see what you see from the school and the church. By 1910, the house on the left had gone, which only left the house on the right, which is nearest the cottage. The single dwelling was in the same position, made out of the same material, in the same shape, with the same gable orientation as the garage that we would like permission to build. So unlike the previously approved expired application, we think it's a lot more historically sympathetic. Additional photos, if you could just cycle through the other ones, are views from the churchyard. I know there was concern over what it would look like from the churchyard, but from every place in the church, our garden is obscured by this nice yew tree, and there's a huge redwood descendant as well that blocks it all year round. With regards to archaeology, we're lucky enough to be neighbours with archaeologist Professor John Hunter, who's fantastic, and he's confirmed that the site is an area of interest, mainly because the church was an Anglo-Saxon settlement site. But pits next door in Home Farm didn't yield anything a few years ago, and the dwellings that were on the site likely caused a lot of destruction. But it still is of interest. Geophysical techniques won't show anything because of the volume of debris from the previous dwellings and destructions and use, but it would be beneficial to have some test pitting to cover the footprint of the garage and the driveway, and we're more than happy to support that. I ask that you grant permission. It's a historically compassionate application. It will protect our children from the road, enhance the area, and help us continue to enjoy the house that we love.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions for our applicant? Yes, Councillor Hedge-Sheriff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good evening.
Hi.
Right. So you need an office above your garage?
Yeah, ideally. So both me and my partner work from home a lot.
Right.
So my partner works in bank and I'm in engineering. So since COVID, there's not many office seats.
So how many spaces for cars will you get off the road, basically?
Underneath two.
Two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a double garage, so it's just normal kind of 6x6 squeeze 2 cars in job.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions for our applicant? No, in which case, thank you very much for your contribution.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so our final speaker on this item is the ward member, Councillor Listwood. Good evening, Councillor. So, yes, you have 5 minutes. Happy to give you a 30-second warning, and otherwise, when you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Chair, members. This application is supported by the Parish Council and neighbours, as has already been mentioned. I note, though, there was one objection from a neighbour to the north of the property who was concerned about being overlooked. The proposal that the applicant has put forward should mitigate against that objection. The reason I support this application is that the principle to grant planning permission was already established. And indeed, I think in conversation, if the garage had been, as proposed, had been moved further backwards, I don't think we'd be here at committee this evening. The difference between the new position, or the new application, and the previously consented application is largely a matter of position of the garage, as I said. This is proposed in order for the garage and office to remain subservient to the main listed building and recent extension, which hasn't been mentioned, and to enable safe vehicular access and increase off-road parking has been explained. To reduce the elevation of the proposed building above the road level to avoid the neighbouring property being overlooked to the north, and to maintain this as the garden as usable family space. The site drops considerably from the centre of the garden, which is where the suggestion is that the building should be, towards the road. I estimate that at something like 1 metre or 3 feet has already been mentioned. The applicant's design moves the building closer to the boundary. The original was some 6 metres away from it. And this was because of the access that was required, meant that it had to stand back from the road. I hope members have noted that there are no pedestrian pavements to this part of the road. The cottage has a stream running through it, through to the one side and through the garden. And in order to maintain the usable space, the position of the proposed building needs to be moved forward. Another advantage to reposition the garages to the closer to the boundary is that the visual impact on the Cotswold National Landscape is much reduced because it is lower on the horizon, as it were, and more embedded in the main part of the village. This is the centre of the village. The applicants have indicated that they would be happy for additional planting and additional screening to be part of the scheme. Historically, the site which the garage is to be built was that of cottages, as the applicant has mentioned, and since demolished. The fact that the archaeology underneath that is known and has been researched, the test pits would be required, because actually any geophysics that they could use would be useless because of the debris from the old cottages that would be there. In fact, you might call this a brownfield site because it was previously built upon. The proposed building attempts to mimic the position and orientation of the buildings that used to occupy the site, and therefore reinforces the historic nature of this part of the village, and is compliant with CS8, CS9 and the Made Neighbourhood Plan. Moreover, the view from the church to the property is obscured by substantial coniferous trees, in the churchyard and deciduous trees on the green in the sightline across the road between the two buildings. The proposal does remove trees from the site, but a condition to replace trees and add additional planting will be a mitigation of any harm by removing the trees and need not be a reason to be refused and could be conditioned. The scheme would increase highway safety for other users and provide safety in loading children into a vehicle at the current parking place. A traffic survey of only a few weeks ago counted 900 vehicles a day passing that point. Thank you. On balance, therefore, I believe that this application is reasonable in planning terms and urge members to grant permission in order to improve the utility of this family's property, enable working from home, so reducing travel to Gaydon and Banbury in the spirit of CS1 and CS2, whilst enhancing the current street scene. I urge officers to grant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions? Yes, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to ask your opinion as the ward member on, in the report, it said that they believe that this development will have a detrimental impact on the character of Main Street and the character of the conservation area as a resident of the area. What do you believe that that's the case, or is this in keeping with the character of the area, or will it have any sort of detrimental impact?
This is opinion. On the opposite side of the road, there are 1960s bungalows, raised up some 2 metres above the road level. So my answer to your question is no, I don't. I think the scheme can be an improvement to that property, but it will not harm the existing scene. At the moment, as you saw from the photographs, it's a rough scrub area in effect, because it's unusable. And I think this would, if anything, enhance the street scene in the village. And also the boundary of the Cotswold, what do we call it, national area, AOMB, I'll say. I know it's not that anymore. It's dropping it on the horizon down into the body of the road area, so it will be less observable from the escarpment.
Thank you. Councillor Parry.
Thank you. Good evening, Councillor Littlewood. The officer's report makes reference to the proposed garage building would fail to preserve the setting of the Grade 2 listed dwelling, but positions it as less than substantial, which cannot be outweighed by public benefits. Now, I know the parish council made reference to the doctor's surgery, which is literally pretty much adjacent. It's just across from Peacock Lane, and I am a patient of the Red Horse surgery. But I tend to go to the Kyneton surgery rather than Tyso, but occasionally go to Tyso. Looking at the public benefits, quite often, how would you describe at busy times of the surgery the car parking spaces available at the surgery, and what sort of impact does that have to members of the public coming into Tyso? Because obviously currently the applicant is having to park basically on that corner. I'm just interested to know if you feel there could be a public benefit from a parking perspective in view of the busy surgery next door, and also how this impacts on the character of coming into, because this is more Middle Tyso, isn't it? It's the entrance into Middle Tyso. So I'd just be interested
Parry,
on
shall we
views.
let Councillor Littlewood sort of respond?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's in the centre of Middle Tyso. It is on a sharp bend, and the building is on the outside of the apex of that bend, immediately on Peacock Lane. In fact, the address is Peacock Lane, not Main Street. The surgery is to the right, as you saw it looking from the road. The surgery is a subsidiary surgery for Kyneton and is therefore required to have parking for its workforce, so doctors, nurses, admin staff and pharmacists. So there are probably half a dozen car parking spaces that are taken up by staff. That, with the recent sell-off of the old vicarage, which was actually part of the same estate, as it were, of the surgery. The surgery was built by the side of the building in the last 20 years, 30 years maybe, and so. The car park now, as it stands, is very, very limited, and there are probably only 4 or 5 car parking spaces for patients. Consequently, people want to park on the road. It's a dangerous place to park. It breaks down verges, etc. The parking in front of the cottage itself is actually in itself a problem, which hasn't been mentioned or addressed. If a car is parked outside the cottage at the junction with Peacock Lane, then emergency vehicles and service vehicles are unable to enter Peacock Lane.
Thank you. Any further questions for our ward member? Councillor Harvey.
Councillor Littlewood, I'm struggling here with the 2 issues. One is parking and one is a garage. On the question of parking, would you accept that the parking issue concerning this house could be solved by the installation of a drive and space without a garage being built?
That isn't the application we have in front of us. But the application is for a garage, and the original planning permission was given for a garage. The original driveway in would not have coped with the necessary car parking. One can park in a field if one has access to a field. Is that acceptable? Does that improve the street scene? I don't know, but I think my answer to you, Councillor Harvey, is that that would be opinion. It's not fact, and nobody's. I don't know that we can look at something which is outside of the application itself. But I stand corrected happily, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions for our ward member? No, in which case thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, we can move on then to points of clarification. I'm going to jump in quickly. I think it was the applicant, when they were speaking, made reference to tree report that has been submitted. Obviously, we made note of that previously. Actually, I've got a follow-up, but if you could just respond on that quickly.
So this is the amended plan that was submitted. Notably, they removed a section of dry stone walling and replaced it with a hedgerow due to the concern regarding the development with to the roots of the tree. It still goes up to this tree, and there's still a large surface of hardcore that parking will be on. At this point, we don't know where the roots are for these trees and how much harm the actual development itself would. Clearly some aspects of the development are still under the canopy, but like I say, without this report we can't ascertain how harmful, if any harm is created by the development, and if so, how harmful is it on the trees.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question, which was with regards the building that has been demolished in the past. Was the conservation officer aware of this being there, and is that a consideration that they would incorporate into their view as to sort of previous buildings and the form that they take? And obviously, as was stated, this was
without checking
to emulate.
Comments, I can't answer yes or no to that at the moment.
Not to worry, thank you. Councillor Harvey.
You raised the issue of the conservation officer. On reading the papers, I couldn't find any. There's no mention in the list of consultations that the conservation officer has been consulted, and I didn't spot any references in the officer's report to the views of the conservation officer. So I posed a simple question: Was the conservation officer consulted, and if so, what did he say?
Yes, so the conservation officer was consulted and he raised objections to the development by ways of the impact of the setting of the listed building. He also drew to the conclusion that the removal of the trees on the site would also cause harm by ways of the openness of the site as existing.
Follow up or no?
Fine, I'm very grateful for that clarification. Oh, question of the previous cottages that were on the site. Should we take any account of that?
I don't have any solid evidence that there were. Obviously, there are photos which are provided by the applicant. As Declan has confirmed, we're not sure whether the conservation officer had regard to that in coming to their conclusions. What I will say is it was obviously demolished a long time ago, and looking at the site as proposed now, the advice and the expert advice from our conservation officer is that that garage would adversely impact on its setting. So my view is that may very well have been a cottage there, but looking at this proposal, harm has been identified.
Thank you. Councillor Scorer.
Just slightly on that, my question is this a brownfield site? And because obviously whether there was a building there, and did you put any weight to that in your recommendation? And because if it is a brownfield site,
This is something I've been made aware of since the meeting today. Well, sorry, since receiving the images yesterday.
would it change your recommendation?
It's hard. I'd argue not. I think at the end of the day, we're assessing the development as proposed. As existing, the land is open with trees on it. It's in quite a prominent position within the street scene. And we're looking at the development by ways of the garage and accommodation above. So whilst it's potentially historically been there, that's not part of what we're assessing as this development itself.
If I can add in as well, the assessment of whether land is previously developed really comes down to the principle. So it's where you're looking at a new house on a piece of land. Is it greenfield? Is it previously developed? So my advice to members would be that it's not particularly relevant as to whether the land is previously developed or not. Officers haven't raised objection on the basis of the principle of development. The principle of a garage in this location, not in the location, sorry, the principle of a garage is accepted. It's the impact that it has on the visual amenity, the AONB, and heritage matters, trees and archaeology that's the concern. So I don't think it's something we need to kind of grapple with.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
If, after discussion, we were minded to grant this application, would it be possible then to put in a condition that this didn't in the future suddenly become a separate dwelling? We've got a bit of history in the district of double garages with accommodation above mysteriously becoming planning applications for accommodation and separate dwellings in the future. I know we can only vote on what's in front of us tonight, but is that something we could consider if that's where we get to?
Absolutely. We need to ensure it meets the 5 tests for a condition, but subject to that, an ancillary condition would likely be more than reasonable.
Thanks. Councillor Eden.
We've mentioned, or it's mentioned in the report, the 2011 application. You don't happen to have a visual of that, do you? Just so I can get my head around. It's not quite a fallback, but you see what I mean. Thank you.
(2011). This is Main Street. Obviously, that's the main dwelling here. the existing parking space just to the side. It's positioned considerably further into the plot. I believe the drawing says by 8.5 metres from the roadside.
Any further points of clarification? Councillor Parry.
Yes, I'm just would welcome some clarification. The conservation or the report makes reference to the harm being less than substantial, and my concern is if the conservation officer thought this was, if that it was causing harm, why wasn't it actually put as substantial? And I'm because at the end of the day, there was the opportunity if the conservation officer, when they looked at it, thought it was really, really harmful, they would have gone with substantial, but gone with less than substantial, which is quite a bit further down. Does that reflect the fact that there was permission granted for a garage previously, or I'm just really surprised that if the conservation was so against this, they would have gone with substantial, but they've gone with less than substantial, which means that we can, providing there are public benefits.
If I can come in, any harm to a heritage asset needs to be given great weight, and it needs to be given considerable importance and weight in decision making. The term less than substantial is a bugbear of a lot of planners because it implies that it's not important. That's not the case. Any harm is very important to a heritage asset, and we need sufficient public benefits to outweigh that harm if members were to agree with the conservation officer and the officer that harm is caused. So substantial weight is an extremely high bar to get to. So most applications probably that we see before committee, the conservation officer will be identifying less than substantial harm, but that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be giving that harm considerable importance and weight. In fact, we need to be doing our jobs properly.
Thank you. Any further points of clarification? No, in which case we can move to debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. So that we've been quite thorough with this, and I think it was good having the local knowledge here tonight. So I think from what we've heard, I think I've come to the belief that I don't believe that there is a detrimental impact on the AOB conservation area, and I don't think it has a discordant relationship with the listed building, this proposed structure. I think the principle of development is already there with historically what's been there, and also the structures of the shed and what's already got planning for a garage in a different position. In relation to CS8, I think, yeah, if members are minded to think that this does cause less than substantial harm, I think that providing safe vehicular access and off-road parking and highway safety improvements, I think that is a public benefit to be taken into account. And in relation to the trees, I believe that this issue could be mitigated by condition. But I'd like to hear the views of my colleagues on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hensheriffin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm mindful of supporting this application. It's modern day living and working from home. It's alleviating the parking on the road. It will give a bit more room for the family in the cottage, because if they're going to have office above a garage. And I don't see any other reason I will support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Eden next.
I agree in part with Councillor Holmes. Condition 3 and 4, to my mind, can be preconditions and sorted out relatively easily. Obviously, that we've got it in front of us, the principle of a garage and a drive in, or an opening for the drive in more or less the same place is fine. However, I still have a problem with the scale, which is key points in conditions 1 and 2. And I think that's part of where the officers, that both of those conditions agree with each other, that the scale is the problem. That is smaller, this is bigger. And if we're going to take we've talked a bit about, other applications and other ideas that are here, but this is what is in front of us. And for me, agreed within two conditions and the officer's report that the scale is wrong. So therefore, it's close, but it's not quite right for me. And I think those two conditions still hold up. So I'm not going to make a proposal. It's obviously still in the round, but I'm kind of minded at this moment to agree with the officer's decision.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, I think this is a difficult one to sort out because clearly there is a problem with parking, and there is a public benefit to the village as a whole to sort the parking problem out and get cars off the road. So I think that is a public benefit, a significant public benefit. On the other hand, this is a setting within a listed building. It's within a conservation area. There's a statutory obligation on us as decision makers to have special regard and pay special attention to those factors. The application that is illustrated, the previous application, demonstrates that it is possible to produce a garage on the site with parking and a driveway, which was accepted, and yet, which is the greater need, is the need to preserve the setting of the listed building offset by the advantages of the solving of the car parking problem. That's in my terms, that's my dilemma. But I think in cases of doubt like this, I would be prepared to go with the officer's recommendation, because that would not reduce the possibility of a further application which could be accepted as the previous one was.
Thank you. I'll just add my own comments actually. I'm in agreement with Councillor Harvey. There's a lot that I do like about this application. I'm sympathetic to the views expressed by the applicants and the community through the parish council and ward member in regards to parking, and I would like to see a benefit from a future application potentially to rectify any issues, but I don't think that exactly what's here in front of us tonight is quite right given the issues that were raised by the conservation officer. I think it's potentially a situation where they've tried to be sympathetic to a previous aspect on the site based on the buildings that have been there in the past, but I think that's not something that's kind of ringing true with regards to how the conservation officer would view the site from now. And so I think I'd be supportive of the principle of sort of improving the situation and offering home working for the applicants, but in this case I don't think it's quite right. That's my feeling at the moment. I believe Councillor Parker next.
Thank you, Chair. So I agree with the voices that have spoken that this is a difficult balance. I think there is a general view that getting the vehicles off the road is a good thing, and we are balancing the harm versus the benefit as usual. I would like to, and this is not a new notion. We've heard it, in fact, I think from the applicant, that the previous application, which was supported, and it was supported because it was less impactful, because it pushed the garage further away from the street scene. It consumes the garden much more significantly, and I'm very interested in us not tarmacking over gardens, and it makes it a more compact arrangement. So there is, versus the previous application, there is more effect on the street scene, but there is more preservation of green space at the rear. And I think for families, that's quite an important attribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really difficult application that's before us this evening. But something tells me, I've been trying really, really hard to look at ways to try and support this, because I do believe there's a significant public benefit in getting the cars off the road. However, it's just not quite right. I think it's nearly right. And I know it's a real pain when we come and look at these things, but I do think, whilst I'll take Councillor Parker's view on the garden side of things, I just think it needs to come, it's not quite in the right location. And it is with regret that I shall be going against. I've tried to look at every possible way, and obviously tried to look at the public benefits, and I think the public benefits are significant with the car parking. But we do like to feel with the committee, if something's not quite right, please come back with something that's closer to what was granted previously.
Councillor Scorer.
Thank you, Chair. When the previous, that was nearly 13 years ago, a lot has gone on in the world in 13 years. And I take it on board what you say about the street scene, but I think that it will blend in with the street scene. Somebody who drives through Tyso quite a lot, I think, you know, that you won't see that because you'll be looking at the bend rather than it's not going to be a blot on the landscape, shall we say. And also that, you know, a lot has changed. People do work from home. So, you know, I don't think that having an office above a garage, maybe 11 years ago was different, but now, you know, it's quite acceptable. So I'm in favour of...
Thank you, Councillor. I'm aware we've not had a proposal as of yet, but I'm actually keen to just have some input from our planning manager with regards to responding to the direction of the debate, as it were.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to clarify to members, obviously officers have identified heritage harm, and I've previously advised that where we're identifying harm, even if less than substantial, we need to give that great weight. And we need to come up with sufficient public benefits to outweigh that harm that's been identified. So there's essentially two options if members are minded to grant, that they will be required to accept that there's harm, but that there are significant public benefits to outweigh that harm, or that you don't consider that there is harm. Something I just wanted to add in respect of the public benefits point is officers agree, and I agree, that providing off-road parking is a public benefit inevitably. But I think coming back to a question that Councillor Harvey had earlier, members should consider whether this is the best solution to provide off-road parking, whether this garage is the only way to provide that off-road parking. I think officers' view was that the level of benefit to be attributed to the provision of off-road parking was moderated and reduced because there are other ways that it can be provided on site aside from this garage as proposed. So I just wanted to make members aware of that so they can consider that in further debates and proposals.
Thanks very much, Alice. So I think Councillor Holmes there.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't want to repeat everything I've said before, but I'd just like to formally put in a proposal to accept the application.
Thank you very much. Can you just clarify your reasons, please, for your proposal?
My reasons are because I believe that there is, although that there may be less than substantial harm, I think that the public benefit outweighs this. Is there anything else?
And can you just elaborate on the public benefit as you see it, please?
I've already said it, but I can say it again. Providing safe vehicular access and off-road parking and highway safety.
Thank you very much. Okay, who would like to go else on the debate? So far we have a proposal which has not been seconded. Can score a seconding, thank you. Okay, we do have a proposal which has been seconded to grant against officers' recommendations for the reasons given. Is anyone else itching to go into the debate, or are we going to have a vote? Okay, on that. Could we just look at the conditions that would be required for that, please?
Are members happy that the conditions are in obviously summarised form listed on the slide there? So we've got 3 years, approved plans, materials which would require a sample at least of stone, climate measures, some sort of archaeological investigations, tree survey to get that tree information, another materials condition, Declan.
Sorry, so the first materials was just for the, I should move that actually, it was just for the, because we haven't got any issues with the hard standing for the parking. So it can be in accordance with that, but we'd require materials for the garage and the dry stone wall.
And then the 2 highways conditions that have been recommended. So essentially we'd scrap one of those material conditions and then we'd have 1 material condition which would cover the garaging and the walling. And an ancillary condition we would also add on to ensure that it is used in an ancillary way to the dwelling and can't be occupied as a separate dwelling.
Thank you. I take it you're happy with that? Yeah. And Councillor Score as well? Yep. Okay. In which case we have a proposal to grant the application against for the reasons given, subject to those conditions. Can I see all those in favour, please?
6.
And opposed?
3.
And abstentions?
1.
Okay, in which case committee resolves to grant application 24/00345/FUL. We'll take a brief adjournment. Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone. We'll now move on then to our final application, which is application 24/01875/FUL, Red Horse Vale Limited, Windmill Farm, Banbury Road, Oxhill. Paul is our presenting officer. Once you're ready, you can take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully a fairly swift one to finish off with. Famous last words, eh? There we go. So, attentive members will recall this site. It's Red Horse Vale. Fairly recently, all the days are blurring into one at the moment, but fairly recently, the building very much like this one on the opposite side of the access, sort of about here, if you can see where my mouse is on the map there, was granted permission for demolition and rebuild. It's precisely what's going on with this one with a nice red line around it. It will be slightly larger in terms of footprint, but as you can see from this plan, the red dashed outline is the existing building, and the bold black outline is the proposal. As I say, slightly larger in plan, but the elevations, there's not a great deal to choose between them, losing that sort of Dutch barn element in the middle and being replaced with a dual pitch roof. The reason for this, I'm told, is that the existing building is somewhat dilapidated state, although still operational. You will also have noted that there is an update on the update sheet. We received a rather belated objection from well, not an objection so much as a request for further information from County Ecology. They would like photos exactly like this one to find out whether there might be any bats or birds roosting in there. Those have been provided, forwarded to the ecologist, but all of this has happened within the space of the last few days, so we don't have a final view on that yet. So the recommendation, my recommendation, Chair, is now, this is a bespoke one, grant planning permission subject to satisfactory resolution of ecological concerns and response of no objection from WCC Ecology. The reason it is before committee is because the applicant is a family member of a member of the council. Otherwise, it would unlikely come to your attention.
Thanks very much, Paul. Okay, we have one speaker on this, who is Ward Member Councillor Littlewood. Good evening, Councillor.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Yeah, I want very, very briefly just to emphasise that this is a thriving business. It's very, very important in the area of in both parishes of Oxhill, Tysoe, and the Pillertons. A lot of the locals rely on its services and its products for their day-to-day living and activities. It's a significant employer in the area, employing some 45 people full-time, and that peaks towards 100. I can only see this as improving the street scene, actually. It's because the existing buildings are in a poor state, and I think to improve the look of the place, to improve security and safety of the products stored within the building, I think I'm pleased to see that the recommendation is to grant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for our ward member? No, in which case, thank you very much. Points of clarification from our officers? Nothing forthcoming. Then we can move to debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Eden, I think I saw first, but go on.
I think it looks fantastic, and I suggest we go in line with officers' recommendation and grant.
Thank you very much. Just to confirm, that's the updated recommendation?
Indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, will his name?
Second.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to contribute to the debate? No, in which case we have a proposal to grant in line with the updated officer's recommendation. Can I see all those in favour, please?
Unanimous.
In which case, committee resolves to grant application 24/01875/FUL. Have we got any urgent business? In which case, meeting's closed. Thank you very much.